There's a typo in your text, yeah.
Did I type a make a mistake? A Slido, sorry. Slido. Important point.
'Hi Vish, hi Anu.
Hi. Hi.
Nice
How
to
are
meet
you?
you.
Hello.
Able to see the chat board, right? I put some information about Slido and things like that.
Yes.
Partha, you can see it, right, Partha? So maybe you can periodically start putting some this thing, no? In case people are not knowing Slido, you can see putting them about Slido. Two more minutes, we'll start.
Okay.
Hello, Gopal
Hi.
this time.
Hi, Gopal. Thanks for joining. Okay, guys, let's get started. So we'll welcome Ms. Anuradha Schultes. She's the CEO of LendUp Global, digital lending company in California. Thanks, Anu, for joining the session today.
Of course. Thank you
What
for
we're
having
going,
me.
what we're going to do is I'm going to do a very quick presentation on about this CEG Connect series, and specifically talking about some instructions on what people should and should not do. So the guidelines are: please stay muted during the entire session, and also please turn off your video. The entire session is going to be recorded and it will be available in our portal cegconnect.com. So people who couldn't stay the whole period of the session can also watch the recorded version of it, which will be available tomorrow. If you have any questions that you want to ask Anu, you please use the Slido program. I have put some instructions on the chat bar on Google Meet on the side. Slido is Slido, slido.com, and you have to put in a code, which I also have put in the chat box in Google Meet. Um, there will be a periodic live polls in Slido, which I will be sending, basic questions, multiple choice questions. Please participate in the poll. We want to get real time feedback from the audience so that we can fine tune the program to make it more valuable to you. And during the question and answer session, if your name is called, please unmute yourself. What I would like you guys to do is, in the Slido, you'll have two tabs. One is for answering polls, another one is for question answers. You can post your question anytime during the session. And what I will be doing, I'll be watching your questions. And if the question that you're asking is a very unique question, then I'll ask you to unmute yourself to ask the question to Anu. If many people have very similar questions, then I will combine them and ask the questions on all your behalf. But if any of you feel that you want to say something, please unmute yourself and you can ask the question to Anu or myself. Okay. So today's speaker is Ms. Anuradha Schultes. I'm the host, and Partha is my tech support. All our LinkedIn profiles are there. To join Slido, just have to either use your mobile phone and scan this scan code, or you can just type slido.com in your browser. And when you pull up slido.com, you can put 656404 as the code in the participation box. So this is how the screen will look when you open Slido. It'll ask for enter your code here. You just put in the code 656404, and then you should be able to get to the screen. When you come to the screen, you see there are two tabs: Q&A tab and all polls tab. And the polls tab will have the polls, and the Q&A tab you can ask your questions. Okay. Without going any further, I'm going to move on to the session. I'm going to stop presenting so you guys can. Okay. So again, welcome Anu to the session. What I want to do, Anu, is the first, since people don't know you, maybe you can spend the first maybe first 10 minutes or so talking about your journey from when you left us the wonderful campus of CEG to where you are now. I have read your story, so I am very familiar with the story, and it's an amazingly inspirational story. So I'm hoping you can share the highlights of the story for people to also get to know you, and more importantly inspire youngsters, because you have gone through a lot to get to where you are, and people can learn from you. So over to you, Anu.
All right. Thank you. Thank you for having me. So I do have a unique story. I kind of joke about how I have always felt I never fit in anywhere. And so over time, I just figured out how to make my own space wherever I am. So my story, actually, I want to briefly touch before how I even got to CEG. Um, I grew up in Chennai and Delhi, but my high school was in Delhi. I always did. My dad worked for central government, so I went to central schools, and I always did very well in school. I was class topper, which I know is very important to Indian parents throughout my schooling. And, I actually got into my dream was to get into IIT. I didn't because I was too nervous. I was very stressed out for the IIT exam and I did not make it. But then I got into Roorkee. So I actually went to Roorkee for a few months and I just hated it. I mean, just very clearly, I just didn't fit in. And so when I got an interview phone, I jumped at the chance and I took it. I came down. I literally, my dad showed up one day and said, "You have an interview and I'm not like day after tomorrow." And so we literally, we took a bus home and then I got on a flight and I just showed up. I mean, that's how my Anna experience started. And frankly, I had no pressure because I was already at Rookie. and I really aced the interview, and that's how I came to Anna. So my story, and it's just one of those things where, well, I know at the time that Roorkee was higher ranked and probably more, I know now it's a renamed to be IIT. Just I didn't feel like I was going to succeed there, but just a lot of little things, and I just decided that I was comfortable with Chennai and I'm going to make that leap. Um, so I graduated in computer science and engineering in 1990, and came to the U.S. for a master's. I came to Cleveland. Case Western Reserve University at the time was number one in operations research. My goal was actually to mostly I applied to CS masters, but then loved the OR class, um, operations research class under someone who was a graduate of, and you guys might know him, Sesha Sai. He was our lecturer. He graduated with a master's from Case Western, and he said, "Hey, you're so good at it. I would really love for you to attend the school." So I really applied almost as okay, I'll do it. It wasn't because I really intended to come, but that's the one where I got the best offer funding wise. And so I landed in Cleveland and met my husband. His name is Bruce. He's Caucasian, obviously not Hindu. Um, and once I graduated, I got recruited by a company based in San Francisco. And at the time it was called First Deposit. They came on campus to recruit because the CEO, Shailesh Mehta, he's actually very well known in India in the IIT Bombay circles. He was a PhD from that department. And so that's how I got recruited. Like back in 1990, not too many companies hired you if you had visa issues, and it was almost impossible. So I actually landed there quite by, just like I landed in Anna almost by happenstance. Like my dad, I remember telling me that he almost missed the postcard that was slid under the door saying I had that interview. So I landed at Case almost as happenstance, and then I landed my first job as a happenstance. Really loved my job. It was analytics. It's interesting that I had a CS degree. Coming out of CS, even though I was trying to pursue a master's in CS because everybody else in my class was, I realized over time that at my heart, I'm a quant. I can do coding. I learned SAS on the job, and I became an expert SAS coder in less than 6 months. I have an aptitude for coding, but I really, in my heart, I'm a quant. And to me, the first deposit job, they over time renamed to Providian, and they became the precursor to Cap One, right? We were competitive. We were. I landed in the perfect spot for me, just like I landed in the perfect master's program for me because I aced it. And so, I know I won't go at this pace. I'll speed it up. After I graduated, I did get married with my husband, with my parents' permission. I came to India to get married and continued to work at Providian for 8 years. I ascended to VP over 8 years. It was a meritocracy. It was run by, we were all engineers doing quant work, very competitive. Throughout the 8 years, I always felt like I was behind. Only later in hindsight that I realized that I did really well. Like part of my story also is that I'm always thinking I'm not doing great. And I hope that some of the students who are listening hear that because I always felt like I'm always behind. This person started with me, they are at a higher position than I am. They probably make more money. Why am I not doing better? But then I made VP at 30, had my first child, and then realized that as much as I loved my job, I really there was just a lot of guilt from being a new mom. I had a long commute from San Jose to San Francisco. Just, didn't feel good about what I was doing. And so when my husband got a job in Ohio as a faculty, as a untenured, right, he started as assistant professor. I kind of said, I was very naive. I said, oh, I have done so well. Like I am a VP. I have a $150 million budget. I should be able to land a job, no problem. Like my husband's the one starting out. That's when he finished his PhD. And I said, plus it gives me the chance to take a break, figure out what I want to do. Moved to Ohio, and it was kind of a shock to my system. Those of you who've lived in the U.S. and are living in the U.S., California is like its own country. The culture is very different. So I ended up in Ohio, had trouble finding a job. I was asked things like, why don't you work in IT? Uh, and really struggled with the concept that as an accomplished VP, I couldn't find a job at the level I wanted. And I kept hearing, why don't you go do a PhD? I mean, why don't you go do an MBA? Because if you want to be in management, and my response would be, but I've already been in management. Like I didn't. Anyway, long story short, I decided to get an MBA. I was pregnant with my second child. I took my MBA 4 days before I gave birth. Again, I wasn't stressed about it, so I did really well. But then the only closest ranked institution close to me was in Columbus. So actually, when my second daughter, was just 6 months old, I started commuting to Columbus from Cincinnati. It was 2 hours each way. I did a full time 2 year program, and the second year, in fact, I was also a TA. Um, and coming out of it, I thought, oh, I now have an MBA, I should have no problem finding a job. And turns out it's not true. The fact how I looked and the fact that I was a minority mattered in Ohio. It didn't matter in California. It didn't matter in Ohio. Nevertheless, I landed a job at a super regional bank called National City. One small thing I want to tell you is that back in when I was struggling with my job search and I'm kind of frustrated, my husband asked me, so what do you want to do long term? And I said, someday I want to be CEO of a company. I had already made that decision back in 94. And he said, okay, let me, he bought me a small book. I still have it. It's called How to Become a CEO. And that's always been my goal. And I didn't know how I was going to do it. I just knew that my approach to solving that problem was I've already kind of done analytics. I'm really good at it. I had done marketing at Provident because I kind of managed myself into marketing. So when I got a chance to be a product person at a large bank, I said, I'll take it. So my focus was every job I take, I think about, is it adding to my, sort of quiver of arrows? Like, is it adding to my skills? Am I learning something new? And then is it keeping me on the path to my long-term goal? So those were like important things I considered for every job. But to me, it wasn't the level. It was more about, is it expanding my skill set? And is it keeping me true to my long-term goal? So I took the job in Cleveland. And of course, by now my husband's like, he really wanted to leave academia and get into business, I mean, into industry. And then he ended up getting an offer in Florida. So I thought, Ohio had been so challenging for me, even though that's where I went to school. I loved Ohio and I had done 2 degrees, 10 years apart. But when my husband had the job in Florida, I said, Florida is probably better for us. We're a biracial couple. Um, being an Indian woman and married to a white guy with kids who are biracial is actually challenging, even in the most open-minded places. My in-laws were in Florida, so we kind of said, hey, I'll have family support. How great is that? Moved to Ohio. There's no banks headquartered in Florida. It's mostly about wealth management. So I convinced Home Shopping Network, which, is a TV network that sells stuff. For those of you who are not familiar, um, I convinced the CRM guy to hire me. I basically said there was a senior manager role, and so it would be a huge step down because my last 2 jobs had been VP. Um, I now had my third child, so for my second child, I had a 6 month break. For the third child, I decided to take a 5 month break, and I applied for a job, and I said, hey, listen, I don't want to take a 50% pay cut, but I'll take a 25% pay cut. And I don't need the title. I just want the job. So I went in as senior manager and convinced them to pay me, as a director. And within 6 months, they realized I actually operate as a director because once you've, gained the higher level skills, you can't like forget about your skills. You're still going to operate at that level. So within 6 months, I became a director. Was handpicked by the CEO to run a direct marketing program. And so the point being is that I got myself a job because I didn't want to stay home. And I didn't want to, even though I was seeking many steps down, I wanted the job to be interesting. And to me, it fit the criteria that I would learn something new about a totally different marketing channel, which is TV. and it would keep me on my path because I was still expanding my skill set. Um, and then I just negotiated the salary that I was willing to live with, rather than say, hey, I used to make 140K or whatever, and I've been a CEO with 150, I've been a VP with $150 million budget. I said, I'll take this job because I want to stay in the marketplace. I don't want to leave my job, have to re-enter, and my goal was to keep working. So after 2 years, I decided that Florida was good, but not great. My kids got bullied at school because of how they look, because they are biracial. And ultimately, I realized that my job was a dead end, right? Because the main business was TV. If you want to succeed in a company, your skills have to align with whatever their main business is. If you're going to be on the side doing something else, you're always going to be on the side. So I knew that my job was a dead end. Um, I loved it, right? It wasn't like I wasn't having fun. But I really didn't think there was a path. And I don't see how I get to become CEO staying there. And so when my husband's job ironically turned into a 100% travel job because he got promoted and he had to travel Monday through Friday, I said, well, in that case, let me just move back to California. That's where I was most comfortable. So in 2007, literally my husband, graduated to his traveling job, and we moved the family to California. My kids were, 2, 6, and 9. And I decided that I needed to come back. I had moved up again, obviously, to a director, but I was still, compared to my peers who used to be, my peers at Providian, they were probably, VP, SVP, like, some of them had become CEOs, some of my classmates had become CEOs. It was like, I struggled with that. I struggled with, I took almost 7 years to travel to 2 different places to support my husband. And here I am, far behind. Um, it's kind of hard to explain to you what that stress feels like. And then, of course, 2007, right around when we moved, was also the world went into crisis in 2008, but Florida started its housing crisis in 2007. So we couldn't sell our house. I had to pay much higher rent in California. The good news was I landed. The reason I took the job that I took with Account Now was founded by my cohorts at Providian. The former CEO who recruited me out of Case Western was on the board. The CFO of Providian was a CFO's account. I was a small company with 50 people, but I knew everybody. Like I literally walked in the door and it was like coming home. And I needed that. My decision was if I'm going to have all these uncertainty, I'm coming back when, literally as a single parent. My husband was traveling, he would be home weekends. If I have to manage a new job with 3 young kids in a new town, then I need something else to be stable, which was the job needs to be secure. I don't have to come in and spend 6 months proving myself. These people already know me. So those are the sort of, every decision I made, I weighed the pluses and minuses and I said, what is it that I can handle? Um, so 2008 was very eventful for me. We were in financial crisis because we had the very large mortgage in Florida. Because remember, when I moved to Florida, my husband and I, like, we are living here forever. And we built this massive house and we had a massive mortgage. And then, of course, nobody wanted the house. And then I was paying a huge rent because, the area is expensive, has always been. I was a single mom during the week. And I was really only making a director salary. And as much as, you take a huge pay cut going east, but you don't get that back when you come back. And then I was diagnosed with breast cancer. So it was a pivotal moment in my life. Suddenly, the things like I want to be CEO just kind of go out the wayside. You really think about every day, am I going to make it to tomorrow? Am I going to make it to next week? It was advanced. It was not stage 4. It was close to stage 3. For those of you who are familiar with cancer, there's like 1, 2, 2A, 2B, and then 3A, 3B, and then 4. So mine was 2B, where it spread to my lymph nodes. I was only 40, so it was considered very aggressive cancer. The younger you are, the more aggressive the cancer, because typically breast cancer is more common among older women, post menopause, but mine was way early. And, it was to to say it was traumatic is like it's hard to describe, right? So my son is now 3, right? My daughters are 7 and 10, and I'm living alone with my husband coming home on weekends. And I'm trying to navigate my work, my treatment. My parents, came to help me. They stayed with me, and ironically, they have stayed with me since. And I continued to work. I didn't quit my job. My goal was to tell my kids that I'm okay, that I still get up every day and I still get dressed for work and I still take them to school, pack their lunches. I schedule my treatments for either Thursday night or Thursday afternoon or Friday afternoon. So I'd have my weekend off and then I would go back to work on Monday. I had a very supportive team because I had known these people forever. They were my family. Um, and so that took me a year and a half. It was a very intense, aggressive treatment. So I was going through financial crisis, I was going through health crisis, and I was also dealing with the fact that my husband couldn't leave his job because my health insurance was through him. So as a family, we went through this crisis, but I'll tell you, coming out of it, my it wasn't a conscious decision I made. But when you go through a life crisis like that, you realize the things that you care about a lot of times are not important. Like the things I cared about my title or about whether I'm going to make CEO, none of them were important. What was important was that I was alive, I was there for my kids, I was still functioning, and I was basically, living, right? I step out and I feel the sun. The funny thing happened. Well, since I worked through chemo, what happened is I started to speak out more at work. It just happened naturally. It wasn't some big, like, decision I made. It's just that when you're going through all that treatment and you're just trying to literally like get through the day, things that I would have done before because I was afraid to say no to the CEO, I started to say no. There was a meeting where he said, I know I need you to do this. And I said, no, I'm not because it doesn't make sense. And he said, well, I'm the CEO and I'm telling you to do it. And I said, then you should just do it yourself. The point is I lost my fear. And I think that's the theme I want you guys to take away from me is that once I lost my fear of failure because failure didn't matter, then my success just became, exponential. When I left account now to go to another job, I was head of product, became GM inside of 12 months. I built $1 billion business for this company, and then they laid me off because they were not interested in that business. Again, I felt like I hit another low. I had some recurrence and stuff like that I dealt with in 2015, and I bounced back. I joined LendUp. I did a startup I helped someone start a startup for a year and a half. And then when LendUp called me in 2017, I jumped at the opportunity because it was not a CEO job, it was a GM job. It was focused on two things I know really well: lending and people who are, financially not included in the mainstream economy in the US. They call it underserved. So LendUp makes loans to people who otherwise cannot get a loan from anyone else, a bank especially. So I jumped at the job. It was a GM job. I didn't care. I really wanted to be in this space. So I came in, and within 13 months, I became CEO. I didn't come in saying I'm going to become CEO. I came in because I loved the job. I knew I could do it. And it was putting me back in the space I wanted to be in. And so, I've been CEO now for 3 years. First year as CEO, I turned the company profitable. The second year was 2020. I navigated the company through um, COVID. And then 2021, I've launched a digital bank called Ahead Money to expand the set of products and probably going to pivot the company into the new business and exit lending altogether. So I've been able to navigate all of these personal and professional challenges. And I would say the most pivotal thing in my life was that I got cancer. At the 5 year mark, first 5 years, I was always moping. Why me? Why did I have to go through that? I was already behind on my career. Why am I? 10 year mark, I decided, hey, that's probably as hard as it is for me to say it out loud. It was probably the most pivotal moment in my life. It was probably the event that defined who I am. And it's okay. And it made me who I am today. And I'm a better person because I got cancer. And so that's a hard truth, right? People think, oh my God, don't want to talk about cancer. The reason I talk about it openly is to tell people, first of all, you can overcome, life circumstances if you really want to. And if you don't, it's okay, right? We're all just human beings. And we should just move forward, whatever the circumstance. Right? You get the cards you get and you play with them and you hope to win. And the second thing is don't be afraid to just, I didn't talk about it till 2019. when I did a podcast for Career Curves, and I can put that in the chat box. Well, this friend of mine had me talk about this. The reaction was amazing. People were calling me crying, saying, because I listened to your podcast, I think I'm going to do better in my life. And that's why I've been more open about talking about my journey. And so, of course, most recently I made the 50 over 50. Ironically, first of all, I was not expecting to make it. And the person who nominated me was not my PR team, it was my father in law. He put my name in, and I thought he was joking. I ignored it. And then suddenly I got a note from Forbes saying, hey, can you fill out this questionnaire about you because your name has been submitted and you made a short list. So anyway, that's I know it's a long-winded answer, Vish, but I wanted people to kind of hear from me my journey here, right? It's not been an easy one, but I still think it's been a great one.
I think thanks, Anu. I think it's important for people to know that because I had heard the story from you, also had read your story in the podcast that was came last couple of years ago. At what point during this entire journey you said that I'm not going to do anymore, I'm going to give up? Was there any point in time that you said I'm just going to give up?
Um, I don't think I did. This is not in my nature. I think that look, I go back to I have certain things I have to do, right? So getting through cancer for me was more about the fact that I 100% believe that no one else can take care of my kids like I can, right? It was just this decision I had, like this belief I had that my kids would be not better off without me, even though we were financially challenged. Might have been easier financially if I had just given up. But I just knew that I needed to be there for my kids. And I think that got me through cancer, right? On the other side of cancer, my job, when I get into a job, even if it's not my ideal job, my approach is I'm here, I'm spending 8, 10, 12 hours a day. I'm going to do my very best, right? So even if those I applied for the GM job, there and they're like, oh, you're not GM material. And then 6 months later, they made me GM because they realized I was already doing the job and I'd already made the business unit profitable. So the point is, I have never given up, but it's never been, should I give up? It's always been, I'm here. I'm going to make the most of it and I'm going to do my very best. And at the end of it, if people still don't value me, that's on them. That's not on me, right? I never wanted to be in a position because I'm failing because I didn't do my best. If I'm failing because someone else doesn't value me, then I should look around and say, what's next for me, right? So that's always my approach. So the short answer is no, I never thought about giving up. And I never really thought that the way I approach life is we all have to live our lives. And all you have to do is put one foot in front of the other, right? Keep moving forward. And suddenly, whatever problem you're facing, you're going to be on the other side. I always believe that you can never go around a problem. You have to go through a problem. You have to walk through the worst of it to come out on the other side and fully leave it behind.
Super, super. Very nice to hear that. I think these are the kind of things that young students and young alumni they don't have the opportunity to hear. Not just hear about somebody from our own college who had gone through that and who had not only had succeeded in their career to become a CEO, but also has 3 kids and bringing up 3 kids. I mean, it is amazing, Anu. I have to say, it's very amazing. A lot of us do it. A lot of men do it because we have our spouses take care of all the hard, heavy lifting for us. I tell you, in my case, definitely my spouse has done all the heavy lifting. Well, I had a good time galvanizing the world. But yeah, it's good story to hear. I think people will have questions about that very soon. Next thing I want to ask you is that a lot of people are students are deciding, should I stay with engineering in my career or should I go with something else different from engineering? With the computer science degree, I feel that people are not in engineering anyway. They are almost already shifted out of engineering and gone to something different. Do you have any particular point of view on core engineering versus software versus non-engineering?
Yeah, so I look, my most of my classmates stayed with software, and most of them financially are doing much better than me because I've had classmates who've joined Microsoft, Google, Netscape pre-IPO, right? So along this journey, I was also kind of, you're in a peer group and you're kind of looking at, okay, I'm in the Bay Area too, but look at them. I still chose the right path for me because I knew that long term, I just couldn't stay in software. It didn't excite me, right? So I think my advice to all of you is, I know in India, right, I don't know if it's still the process where you get placed into whatever branch based on how you did, opposed to where your interests are. So I would say use the degree to get your first stepping stone, like get the job that, somebody's going to give you a job you really like. Take it, but really focus on long term. What is your goal? And just work towards that, right? My long term goal, it took me what? I made a decision in '94. I became CEO in 2017 and also 2018, and it was totally unexpected when I made it. Like I didn't think I would make it. But what it did do, that having a long term goal helped me think through every time I got a job, if it's aligned with my long term goal. Maybe I'm still 10 miles from it, but am I on the right road, right? Am I generally moving in the right direction? And so that's my advice, is that take whatever your degree you have. To me, it's more about less about the degree, it's more about what skills did you learn. And one of the things I had to learn over time is that people skills are equally important compared to technical skills. So I think you need to focus on what technical skills am I building, what people skills am I building, and ultimately where do I want to be. And also, right now, if you're still a student and you don't know what you want to do 20 years from now or 10 years from now, that's okay. Like you can figure it out over time. I just think that you should take the opportunities you get. And once you take that opportunity, do your very best and then figure out where you want to go over time. So I would not focus on should I be in engineering or not. I would focus on, is this job interesting to me? Am I adding value? And ultimately, am I learning new things as well as contributing to the company? That's been my approach. That's why I'm only a handful of people in my graduating class who's not in software or wasn't been in technology. I'm a user of technology, right? It gives me, my CS degree has given me a lot of leverage in my job as CEO, because when I hire engineers, I know what I'm looking for. I'm not waiting for my CTO to tell me. So it's helped me a lot in kind of widening my horizons and getting the right team to come work for me, because I do have the technical background. I've been a coder. I understand business. I've done marketing. So I'm able to basically recruit the right people and get my point is, the fact that I'm a CS major from CEG is still my foundation, right? And then my two masters are the foundation on top of that, right? I have a master's in OR, which is very quantitative, and then I have an MBA. So I think all of my education is stacked on top of each other and helps me with my job every day. So I wouldn't overthink what should I do now, right?
Yeah, interesting. I did my bachelor's in mechanical engineering from CET, did operation research masters, and did MBA after that. Uh,
Yeah,
and so it's very parallel, looks like a very parallel track we took. And I was running a company for a while in the US as well. So we had very parallel tracks, and I think I can understand some of the challenges that you have gone through and go through as well. Maybe one last thing you can tell folks is that what does LendUp Global actually do? Maybe briefly, so that people can understand and put context to
yeah.
your speech.
So, like I said, I'm not the founder. I was hired as a CEO. Like I came in as a GM and then I was hired as a CEO in crisis. Um, Basically, it's a company. We do $300 loans to people who do not. They may have a bank account, but they have no credit card, and they cannot get a loan anywhere else. And to put it in context, right, $300 here doesn't go very far. So really, we are the emergency loan for people who have no other reason. We're almost the emergency loan of last resort. Um, I've kind of dedicated myself to figuring out how to get more people who are not banked or don't have all of the financial services that most of us take, for granted. How do we get them into mainstream financial services? So we do $300 loans. Since inception, we've made 2 billion. That's with a B in loans, $300 at a time. And we help people improve their credit score. A lot of them graduate to mainstream products. So that's sort of, and I created Ahead Financial as a subsidiary because our goal is to sort of wind down lending and focus on getting them a bank account, and then probably reintroduce lending at a much lower interest rate down the road. Uh, the mission being that I joined the company because of the mission of the company, which is to help anyone get to better financial health, right? We talk about mental health, physical health, but financial health is something that impacts both. And so that's really why I joined the company, and that's what we focus on.
Thank you so much, Anu.
Suddenly, yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead. Please go ahead. Please go ahead.
No, no, I was just wondering. For a minute, you were I couldn't hear you, but you're fine.
No, I think
So,
we
do you want to go to Slido questions or?
yeah, yeah.
Or
Actually, a bunch of questions in Slido already. So let me start by the first question is anonymous. The person is anonymous. What is the best way to deal with subtly racist, sexist, condescending people in the workplace? Not overt enough to be reported. Wow.
yeah, so I've dealt with all of that, right? Like I back in 93 and 94, Providence was an amazing place. I still feel like that was my foundation and that led to a lot of my success. The CEO is still my mentor. I still talk to him once a month. But they had a mentor program where I was assigned to another exec. He was a GM of one of the business lines. And I met with him and he asked me what I wanted to long term. And I said, oh, I want to be CEO. I was like 25, like full of hope, and I'm in the US, I'm flying, and he's like, it's good to have a goal like that. Like some people will never make it, especially people who look like you. Um, so the point is, it's not even I've had overt racism. Like I've been to Europe and I've had some horrible, for business, and I've had some horrible experiences. Like racism, it's not just whether it's racism or sexism, it's not just a US phenomenon, right? It's throughout the world. Like we all learn. Our brains are wired to learn by differentiating this is white and this is green, right? So we don't, that's just human nature. So I used to get super upset about it, like on airplanes when I didn't get service, and my husband would, and then they would suddenly help me because when they realize he's my husband because he's white. I've lived through a lot of painful racist incidents. And over time, I realized that it's really about that person and it's not about me. So I have learned, as much as in the moment I might get upset, I have learned to say, it's not my problem. It's not my problem that they have a problem with me. It's really their problem. So I'm going to focus on my goals. I'm going to focus on my deliverables. And I'm just going to, get stuff done. I was gonna say a bad word and I realized it's probably not a good idea. But point is, you just need to get stuff done and not worry about, do I have never even thought about reporting people because it doesn't. What does it actually do? That unless what tried instead is that when I became CEO, I went and hired a bunch of minorities. Like my executive team was most majority minority. I had six execs. Three of them were four of them, including me, were women. The other two, one of them is an Indian guy, one is white, but the one white guy was LGBTQ. So I ended up with a majority minority exec team. So that's how you make a difference is you go around and when you get a chance to fix things, you fix them. I would not internalize if someone else treats you badly because it's really that person's problem. So that's helped me a lot, right? Because I cannot change the world globally, but I can make a difference in my environment and I can stand up. If someone else is being treated badly, then I jump in and I defend them. But if it's me, I just say, I'll fix it when I have a chance to fix it. But for now, I'm just going to ignore that this happened.
Okay. Interesting. The next question I have in the queue is that what is the best way to combat imposter syndrome in the business slash product management world? I'm not sure what that means. I don't
Yeah,
know.
yeah, no, I know what it means. So, imposter syndrome, all of us have it. It's not just for women, it's also men also have it. It's basically when you get a job and you're like, I don't deserve this. I'm just like, I have to fake it, like when I first became CEO, I became a CEO in my late 40s, right? In fact, I became a CEO when I turned 50. It was the day I found out irony in life is amazing. The day I found out going to become CEO was my 10th anniversary of the day I found out I had cancer. So,
Wow.
and so when they told me I'm going to be that I'm getting the job, I hadn't even applied for it. The company was going through a crisis. They were splitting the company. I had to sell off a part, and I was, CEO was stepping down, and he was going to recommend me. Rather than be excited, I was just like, what is happening? Like, why is this happening today? Because I'm still in my headspace about feeling like, oh my God, 10 years, I'm officially a survivor. So the point being that imposter syndrome is when you get the job and you feel like, I'm not right for this. Like I don't know what I'm doing, or I'm not supposed to be here. And my advice to everyone is everyone has a little bit of that. And even the people who seem super confident, inside their head, they do have doubts. So my suggestion is you recognize you are going through that moment of imposter syndrome, and you literally take that idea and you put it on a shelf. You say, I'm not going to worry about that. I know what I need to do in my job. If you don't know what you need to do, then get the resources, right? Get a mentor, get a coach. That's what I did. I became CEO. The company was in crisis. I had so much to do in front of me. I had no executive team. And I said, here are my biggest problems, and I'm going to solve the first two first, and then I go to the next two and the next two. So I ended up hiring a really stellar, diverse executive team in 90 days. I got myself an executive coach. I learned how to manage my board. So I literally made the list of all the things I need to do and all the things I don't know how to do. And I looked at it as it's a problem. I'm going to solve the problem. I don't know how to handle a board. I'm going to get an executive coach who's going to teach me. Or I'm going to just have, it's almost like therapy. You have to say, hey, I don't know how to do this. I had this problem with my exec today. What do I do with that? So I literally just found the resources. And as a CEO, I realized I had that power to go get an executive coach to figure out where I spend the money. And so it's a matter of looking at what power you do have and then using that to get the resources you need to support yourself and really know that you earned it. There are still people in my company after I became CEO because people were very upset. The outgoing CEO was very loved. um, he was the founder, he was the face of the company. So I inherited a team of 80 people who really thought I shouldn't be there, and I had to manage through that, right? And at the end of year one, I made the company profitable, very first in the history of the company. I had a very stellar executive team. I had the board basically gave me an unsolicited bonus because I had exceeded all expectations. But I worked through that when the team was like, "We don't like you. Like, we don't know why you're here. You shouldn't be CEO. You were nobody." And I never let it get to me because I knew I had a job to do. So I would just say focus on your goals and not worry about what other people think. It doesn't matter what other people think. The most important thing about who you should care about on what they think of you is you. Because as soon as you believe that you're not good enough, that's the reality. You become not good enough. So you have to believe in yourself. Even if you fail, you say, hey, I tried my best, but I failed. Because I am in the process of winding down the lending business. And do I look at it as a failure? No, I don't. I look at it as I figured out long term we need a different strategy. And so I'm going to pivot the company. So I think that always remember that I'm not saying, stand in front of a mirror and tell yourself you're good enough. What I'm saying is become a little thick skinned, and it's hard, I know. Like growing up in India, I felt like we all bring a lot of those sensitivities, with ourselves because we want to please our parents. Our cultural is such that you're not supposed to talk about yourself. I understand all of that. Even with all of that, you can still say, hey, if that person is not treating me well, or if I think I don't know what I'm doing in my job, I'm just going to go solve that problem. It's just one more problem, right? I didn't know how to manage the board. It took me 9 months to figure it out. But in the meantime, I'm like, yeah, this sucks, but I'm still loving being a CEO. So I kind of want to stay a CEO. So I'm going to figure it out.
Cool. Very cool. Very cool. So next question is from Roger Srirajan. Roger, do you want to ask the question? Unmuting yourself.
Yes, Vish, thank you, Anu. I think very inspiring talk, and I think you can feel the how you came up the challenges. So one of the question is, I'm also an entrepreneur. I had no business background. I did some things, but one of the things is how do you grow from the revenues from some level, whatever level you got in, and then to now to like 16 millions. Is there any tips you can give to a kind of an SAS startup company, software kind of
Yeah.
startup company, what they should be doing to grow their business?
Yeah, so look, all
Thank
of my experience thus far has been like B2C, right? So I'm a direct to consumer. I've done all of my jobs have been direct to consumer. But I'll tell you that part of what has fueled my success over time, which helped me like recruit the right people. So that's why some parallels with the SaaS companies, you have to build your network, right? So two things. One is I would set the one thing that's always worked for me, even when I was sick and I thought my life just sucked, right? Is that you have to have goals. So you have to say to yourself, okay, in the next 6 months, I'm going to get X number of clients, but then make it so that it's not like super unrealistic. Right? Don't say I'm going to get 100 clients. Maybe it's about getting three or two, right? Or maybe it's just one. But I would say I'm going to approach 100 people, and I'm going to get one person in the next 2 months. There is a point at which there's a tipping point, right? Because your enough good clients come in that becomes your pitch, and you say, hey, I have all these people staying with me and they love me, and here's the reviews from my clients. So my approach is whether it's direct to consumer where you have to convince consumers who never seen you to put their money in an account you created brand new. Like I created a head financial 3 months ago. I have 20,000 customers. It's more about your pitch, especially in a SaaS business. It's about your pitch. It's about your confidence when you're meeting people. And I would network, right? I would, if you want to if you want to present to 100 people, I'd reach out to 1,000 people. And out of the 100 people, maybe 10 give you serious consideration and you end up with five. So I would just say put some timeline and put realistic, like, also the other thing is you might have to lose money for the first two clients because you want a marquee client or someone who you can say, hey, here's this company is my client, and here's they gave me a 5-star review. That will matter for you to grow your business. So it's okay to lose money on the first two or three clients as long as you time bound it, right? You're going to lose money on them for a year. And then either you're going to have new clients that are going to make up for the loss, or you're going to have to renegotiate with them. That's the approach I would take. It's always about, in the US, we use the term, right? Hustling. Especially when you're starting a business, you have to hustle. It cannot be that your first year is always going to look very different than year five, and the approach you have for the first year has to be very different than year five. You have to be willing to say, I'll give up this, and this in return for getting a marquee client. I know of companies that have gone public recently who are on the verge of going under like 2 years ago, but they hung on and made sure some of they got Square as a client. They lost money on Square for 2 years. But the fact that they had Square suddenly made them, oh, this company can be IPO, because once you get Square, you get some other big companies. I'm not saying for your business you need Square, but I would figure out who that marquee client you want is and figure out how you can get them.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Roger. Next question, another anonymous question about operating cost and product pricing. Who person wants to ask the question? Unmute yourself, please.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. First of all, thank you so much for doing this talk. It is really inspiring for us to hear your story, and I feel like asking this question is kind of like using a cheat code, uh, because your answers so far have been amazing. My question is a little bit context driven again. I'll give you like a couple of seconds of context. I work for a Series C non-traditional robotic startup, and we are, although in Series C, it is like an area where we're figuring out like exactly our product market fit. We're trying to understand what our customers want and need. And so, as mentioned in the question, we have extremely high operating costs as a robotics company, where we've got like double, triple PhDs working 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. So I wanted to understand, how important is it to focus on ROI in your early stage pricing, as opposed to, taking a hit or taking an L on the first few clients just to get that, to get your product out there, because it's sort of closely piggybacks on the previous question. So yeah.
Yeah, definitely. So, look, I think my answer is very similar. I think you have to be willing to take a hit on the first couple clients. But the one thing I'll tell you, I guess I haven't done robotics, but it's surprising to me that you could be a Series C and not have a product market fit, right? That's shocking to me. But I know the fundraising market is crazy, and I think especially on B2B, that tends to happen. B2C, it's almost impossible to even get to a Series A. without really showing some early stage product market fit. That's my experience. So I would say, look, cost is important, especially for product. But my response is your first couple clients, you have to be willing to take a hit. But I would also worry as a Series C company, what is your runway, right? Startups live and die on cash on hand. So
Mm-hmm.
I would almost like my approach would be if I have a company that hasn't actually launched the product and it's a very high cost product, I would look at the PhDs and go, hey, I will give you more equity, but you need to take a salary cut, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because look, I've lived this a couple times. You could even have the product market fit. You could have two or three clients. But if you run out of cash and no one's willing to give you a check, you're
Mm-hmm.
basically out of business and you're going to sell the business for like like pennies on the dollar. Like you might sell a $10 million company for 500K because you run out of cash. So
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the balance you have to consider. I definitely agree that when you're growing a business, you have to your first couple clients, it's not about the margin, it's about getting them in and showing that you have a product that works and using that to get new clients.
Mm-hmm.
But I would constantly say, what is your runway? How many months cash do you have on hand? And what is your plan to get more cash in before you run out?
Mm-hmm. Yep, absolutely. That's it's constantly on everyone's minds at the company. Where our CEO seems to be very chill about it. I think he has an idea of our next funding round, but as a product team, we're a little bit stressed out trying to get our product to market and also combating these crazy costs. But yeah, thank you. That's really helpful.
Thank you. Next question is from the next question is from Bhupalan. You have a couple of questions here. Do you want to ask both the questions, Bhupalan?
Hi, thank you, Vish, for allowing me to speak up. Thanks, Anu, for sharing your story. It's been really inspiring. So the first is a very a trivial question, or just sort of curiosity to understand, how much were you able to grow your business after you stepped in as the CEO of LendUp? Because it's the last 3 years has not been, let's say, easy for anybody to step into this role. So it has been very challenging. So yeah, quite curious to know this.
Yeah. So first of all, when I joined as GM, right, the company had two businesses, a credit card and a loans business. Loans business was super successful. We were not profitable yet. It's because the company also started to build out a credit card and they took on a lot of people. They hired like 100 people. And so there was no chance of overall business being profitable because loans was still generating a lot of cash, but it was all going in to grow this new business. My first job as GM, and I truly believe that this led to me getting the CEO job, is I cut the marketing budget by 90% because I recognized that when you are Series C and flush with cash and you give a marketer a big budget, they're going to spend it, right? So I really brought my analytics to the table and I said, out of the, X million marketing budget, what is actually adding value? What is ROI positive? And I realized that I could cut marketing budget by 90% and still keep my volume because a lot of that 90% was going into experimental channels that were not paying off. And so I guess my short answer to you is, in fact, the reason my first year as CEO, the company was profitable is because I maintained the growth. I didn't increase it, but I cut costs and I made the company much more efficient. And even the reason I became CEO is that when the company decided that they needed to sell the card business because it was taking on too much, it was too expensive. The reason loans survived is because I'd made it efficient and close to profitability. And then the board was like, wait a minute. We thought loans was always the business that's going to go away, but this woman's made it close to profitable. So that's my approach. To me, it's not growth for growth's sake. I know it's sort of a mantra that startups use to get more money. Yes, there is a growth phase, but growth for growth phase after you become a Series C is actually very counterproductive. You have to kind of say, at the end of the day, what keeps the light on is profits. It is not just growth, right? And then 2020, the pandemic hit, and I had to pull back more. I had to lay off people. I went from 80 people to 50 in 2020. I've had to make some really difficult decisions for the business because at the end of the day, my job as a CEO is to deliver on our mission, but also deliver value for all of the stakeholders. The stakeholders include the customers, the employees, the investors, the creditors that I have. And so at the end of the day, the goal is to deliver value for everyone. And as a CEO, you have to find that balance between naturally, if I give more value to customers, it takes away from investors. So how do you find that balance where everyone's getting value from the business? So yeah, it's actually running a high risk lending company in COVID is probably one of the hardest jobs to have. But the reason I think I've been able to handle it is because of my training as, I've done technology, I've done marketing, I've done product, and at my core, I'm a quantitative person. And at the end of the day, that's numbers what makes the business work. So
Mhm. So the second question is also phrased on similar lines. I think I've already used a couple of words that you used now in your first answer. So especially, I want to understand how much is your investment in IT? Do you so it looks like this is a very a volume business, yeah. So I would expect that you
yeah,
have more customers. So it's not a B2B business for sure. So it looks like a lot of transactions happening. So is your with such a small team, do you did you build your own IT systems like homegrown or
yeah. Yeah. So the founders did that. The founders built everything from scratch. So the company was founded in 2011. One of them was a distinguished, or was a young person who was like the platform head of platform for Zynga. So he came with a lot of engineering. His stepbrother was the business head, and so the two of them co-founded the company. They built everything from scratch. But one of the things I did as CEO is when you build everything from scratch, then you have to continue to invest to keep it current. So one of the things I did as CEO was actually, as we decided to upgrade parts of the system, I did two things. One, I brought in external services. Right, we built our own customer service, but customer service technology has moved forward a lot, so it's better to just bring an outside company to provide you the customer service. The second piece I did is actually I reduced reliance on in-house engineers in the Bay Area, and like platform maintenance, I actually outsourced to a company that has engineers. I think it's 3 different countries. So the goal is really being cost efficient, because once the system is built, the thing about lending is whether you build it for 5 loans or 500 loans, some of the infrastructure is the same. The laws you have to comply with are the same. So you have to kind of have that. But the bigger challenge has been for me, how do you make a current system current? Because the system was built like almost 10 years ago now. And then a lot of the new things they built was focused on the business that we no longer own. And so when I had to make the system current, I made choices to be, how do I be efficient, time and cost efficient? Just holding on to something just because you built it is not always the right strategy.
Yeah, thank you, Anu. Thanks for sharing your experience. Yeah.
All right.
The next
I
question
think
is also anonymous question, Anu.
okay.
Challenges faced by the government. What are the
Yeah,
challenges faced? Can anyone who is asking the question? Can you ask the question, please?
I'm also happy to jump in. Like I understand the
Sure,
question.
sure, 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 sure.
Yeah. Look, one of the reasons also I'm pivoting the company is that lending for high risk people is something that regulators in the US do not like. They think we are overcharging customers. It's, yes, we charge a high interest rate is because the customer is high risk, and then my cost of capital is also high, so it can has to flow through to the customer. You know, regulators really, really don't appreciate the business. They don't. Our customers love us. Our Trustpilot score is like 4.7, and I get personal notes from customers every day saying how much I changed their life. But at the end of the day, it's hard to, if your regulators are not part of the story early on, if you don't convince the regulator that your product is worthwhile early on, it's kind of hard to get them on board later. So that's why one of the reasons I'm also pivoting is because I do want to um, provide a broader set of services and be more. I need more investor friendly and regulator friendly products, right? So that's my advice also. If you're going to build a consumer focused business, regulators, actually, that's something that I missed earlier when I talked about stakeholders. They're an important stakeholder. You need to get them on board early on, and you need to build a relationship with them. So that's something that I would say that I've spent my entire 4 years working on, and ultimately really thought through very hard about what does the future of LendUp look like. So it's really important to work on it. I think that middle class, part of the problem also, I think, is that unless you've been on the ground with the same challenges, I've been underbanked. I was a student with only checking account, no credit card. So I know what it feels like to be on the ground, having those lack of choices, but not everybody does. And so that's part of the thing is also that you have to bring everybody along with you on your journey to have a successful long-term outcome.
Okay, cool. The next question we have to see, Anu, is about trust. How do you know when to trust your gut with product direction? You want to answer that?
Yeah. Yeah. So I would say my decision making is a combination of data and gut, right? So you cannot, it's hard to ignore your own personal experience. So I am data driven, but I use it as a guide. So I'll say, okay, the data says X, and then I overlay with that my own personal experience and say, okay, I think this will work. So one example, but the opposite also sometimes works, right? I'll give you a simple example. For I had money, we're deciding between card color. I really thought green is amazing. It's our brand color. How great is it? Then my head of marketing was like, well, let me ask the customer. We did a long study, and customers hated the green because they felt like black was more prestigious, and these are customers who haven't had a card before, and so it mattered, right? So sometimes your gut is wrong because you don't have the right contacts, so you have to go with data. But other times, right, you cannot also ignore your intuition. Like, my intuition has come in handy when I even decide whether to recruit somebody or not, right? Let's say you're interviewing and this person looks great on paper, the data says they've been successful, these are all the reasons. But if my gut is that from a team perspective, they may not be a good fit, I will walk away from them. So I think it's always a combination of data and your intuition, but you have to decide almost real time which way to lean on a particular decision.
Thank you. Next question from Nitya Kala. Nitya, do you want to ask the question? Yes, sir?
Yeah, thanks for letting me ask the question. So yeah, I'm part of a bootstrap startup. I'm part of the founding team. So my question to you is, how do you think you should strategize to convince the board or the founder, right? If you want to become a co-founder or without any much capital investment from your end, especially being a woman, right? In a bootstrap, the funds are very, I mean, you're not deeply funded, you're not VC funded. So, but then the DNA of the company, they want to stand bootstrapped because uh,
No,
that's that's how you run profitable businesses. So how do you?
no.
I mean, being a
So
woman.
I have a tough answer for you, right? So I've lived through this.
Okay,
After I left Blackhawk and then I helped somebody with a startup,
right.
I left because they didn't give me the ownership I wanted. Right? I helped. It wasn't my idea, so I didn't think that I should obviously be a majority or equal co-founder.
Hmm.
But I did launch the product. I ran product, customer service, and brought all the contracts to the table. I brought in almost $1 million of the seed money from my network.
Okay.
But the founder was like, well, I'm sorry, I can't make you co-founder. So my advice to you, and I don't know how long you've been in the startup,
It's been a
my
year.
advice to you is if you don't get what you want now, you're not going to get it later. The longer you stay, the more you're signaling that you're okay not being a co-founder. So that's why I said it's a hard answer, and I lived through this. It's very painful. I walked
Yeah.
away. It was the right thing for me. If I hadn't walked away, I wouldn't be CEO today, right? I didn't walk away because I thought there was something better. I walked away because I knew I needed to walk away because I was never going to get what I deserved, and I didn't want to keep fighting. I didn't want to keep spending my time convincing the CEO that I'm worth it. Because if he didn't see that I was worth it, after everything I did for him in my first 12 months, he was never going to see it. So I think that you need to ask yourself, how much time have you invested here? Can the company function without you? If the answer is yes, they can function without you, but it'll take them another 6 months or then you need to say, hey, I'm adding value today.
Yeah.
I would like to be co-founder. I don't have to be majority, but this is my requirement.
Yeah.
One or two things are going to happen. Either they really respect you and they may not give you exactly what you want, but you guys meet in the middle, or
Yeah.
they're going to say, sorry, you're not who we want. Then
Mm.
that's the answer you need, because you don't need to leave right away, but you do need to think through where you want to spend your time. Your time is money, right? Everyone's
Right.
time is money. Sometimes we don't think that way, but it is. A year that I spend working for someone that's not going to, like, when I left HSN, my job was fine. I wasn't going to be fired.
Yeah.
But to me, spending more time there would not get me closer to my goals. And even though my following 2 years was horrifying, I had so many problems. I always, my financial issues are because I moved and I didn't know the crisis was coming. I still today, if I hadn't left Florida when I did, I wouldn't be CEO today. So every decision you make does impact your long term outcome. But also, you don't have to be rash about it. I don't have to go in tomorrow and say, hey, or else. I think you need to think through, what is it that you want? Do you 100% believe that what you're asking for is fair? And as long as you ask for it the right way and they're having a dialogue with you, then based on the outcome, you decide what you want to do long term. You either stay or you leave.
I think this advice is so, I mean, it's so I mean, it's much needed for me at this point in my life. I think thanks for that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that people don't want to confront it because they feel like they'll
Yeah.
figure it out.
Yeah.
People will never figure it out. Like, no one will ever say to you, oh my God, I was so wrong. Let me like bump your salary by 50%. It's not going to happen, because
Because,
their belief is, if this person's happy, why should I? And
yeah.
there's nothing wrong in what they're thinking, right? But as a woman, I'll tell you that men do not automatically respect you. And I'm sorry to all the men on this call, but that's my experience, is that you have to say, this is what I want and this is what I deserve. And by the way, even in my toughest conversation, I'm still polite. Like, I'm not being rude. I'm just saying, hey, this is what I want.
Yeah.
And then when I said I'm leaving, the CEO said, hey, I'll give you what you want. I'm like, it's too late, because mentally I've moved on. Like,
Right.
it's too little too late, because there's always going to be that barrier, right? So
Yeah. Yeah. So there's always the opportunity loss cost that you have actually spent the time there, right?
yeah,
So
but remember, nothing's, even the time you spent there, even if you decide to walk away, you still take the experience with you. So there's never a wasted moment in your career. You just have to remember that not all of what you get is money. Experience matters. Like, the reason those years I spent at HSN mattered. The years I spent, going around the US trying to get myself a job I wanted matters, because it changed my approach to life. And so I think every experience ultimately is beneficial, even the negative ones,
yeah.
as long as you're willing to learn from it and just bounce back. I can't tell you how many times I've fallen down. I don't count, because I know I'm going to get up.
So it's very inspiring. Thank you. Yeah.
So yeah, all the questions asked. I had a couple of quick ones to ask you. One is, one of the things I try to do is to get more companies to come to CEG to recruit our students.
Yeah.
Obviously, you are a US company based in California. Would you consider getting anyone from India to CEG, either as an employee or as an intern? Because a lot of internship opportunities people are looking for as well. Would
Look,
you
I'm
be?
open to it. I would tell you that I'm in the process of pivoting the company, but I'm definitely open to hiring interns. I think hiring full time gets complicated, especially with all the, visa rules, and there's a lot of talent in the US as well. But my suggestion to students especially is, yeah, be open to internship opportunities and be open to looking at it as more as an experience builder and less about either money, So, but at the same time, if you get a local job, you should take it. I do think that, I'm not as close to the visa rules as I used to be, but my general sense is that the immigration issues in the US have gotten worse, not better. Like, when I came in, it was pretty bad, and then it got better, and then I think it's worse again. So, but I'm open to mentoring. I'm open to helping people think through, like the last question from Nitika. I find that, those are questions that are very hard to discuss, and I'm happy to make myself available to help people think through.
Okay.
You're
So
right.
can I ask students to apply for internship? Would it work that way? People can stay in India and work on an internship project with.
Look, I'm looking at other things I want to do, and I'm happy to, my suggestion is people reach out to me on LinkedIn. You
Okay.
can find me very easily. And then, be basically put in your message. Don't just send me an invite, just put in the message that you saw me talk or give me context. Because I do get, as soon as I got like 50 over 50, I had like 200 invites from people I don't know. And so I want to make sure that I know that you were here and we talked, right? So then I have that context and then I can try to help you. But right now, like LendUp is not recruiting, like, we're still recovering from COVID and we're pivoting. But I'm also looking at what's next for me in the next couple of years. And I am looking also to figure out a company or a product in India. I'm very keen on helping underserved, not just in the US, but also globally. So I have desires to also make an impact in India. So I would love to keep in touch and we'll post things as they come up.
And so the best way to reach you is for people to send a request on LinkedIn with
Yeah,
something.
and with the context.
Okay.
So I
Oh,
know that you were in this call. Otherwise, I don't know, whether you just saw me, I get all kinds of, yeah.
so I'm
Okay.
sorry to interrupt. I just sent you a request without a message in there.
No worries.
Uh,
I'll remember you. Thank you.
I want a mentor like you. I mean, probably.
Thank you. Okay.
So these are
No
intricate.
problem, Partha. I think I'll remember the names from this one anyway. So I did put in the chat the podcast. It's on careercurves.com. It's a podcast that's available on all major, like, Apple and all that. But if you can't find it, you can go to careercurves.com and search by my name. It's very similar to this one. It's really a a journey, my personal and professional journey. So
Super. Thank you so much, Anu. You've been very kind on a Sunday morning to, you're super busy as well. But
no
thanks for
problem.
agreeing. Thanks for agreeing to join the session, and very, very inspirational, I had to say. And I think it's very valuable. A lot of people do watch these videos after I put out there. So you might
Okay.
get a lot more questions in the future from people after watching the video. And I encourage students to come. Unfortunately, today there's a big thunderstorm in the area, and many students who are willing or wanting to join couldn't join because there is a power outage in the campus, and they don't have any mobile signals or Wi-Fi. So many of them send me
No
messages saying
problem.
that we are sorry to not join. But anyway, I'll ask them to watch the video, and then if they have any requests, I'll ask them to put it in LinkedIn with their context as well, so they can send it to you. Yeah. Thank you again so much,
Sure.
Anu, and good luck with your job. I'm sure you'll do well. When LendUp Global chooses to come to India, then we look forward to having your company here. And because we have a lot of people looking for money here, I can tell
Okay.
you. Okay.
Sounds good. Thank you so
Thank,
much.
thank
Bye,
you.
everybody.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Vish.
Thanks for all the comments as well.
Thanks, Anu.
Thank you
Thank
all.
you guys. Bye.